Venezuela's president presents new evidence against U.S. mercenaries who allegedly tried to topple his government. Construction workers in Peru demand aid from the government during coronavirus lockdown. And Israel's top court lets Netanyahu form government despite indictments. Welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is from the South. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has presented new evidence against U.S. mercenaries who allegedly tried to topple his government.
The world is wondering who organized this mercenary and terrorist raid that intended to fill Venezuela with blood. Who organized that? Who is behind that? Who gave the order? Who financed it? When? Where? How? These are answers that are starting to come out every day, and the answers are going to be expanded through the investigations in the coming weeks. There have been testimonies, top testimonies, speaking of the involvement of this individual, this American citizen, a former Green Beret, Jordan Woodrow. He is president and CEO of a security company, Silver Corp, based in Florida. Whoever wants to search for the elements, you will be able to easily get them in the United States. Jordan Woodrow has worked directly with Donald Trump for many years. He has rendered security services, intelligence services. You will see how this person confessed how he was swindled by the extremist Guaido-led opposition in Venezuela. He was swindled, he was robbed, and how he finishes his contract and he tells the truth. He shows the contracts with the signatures, with all the terms and conditions, and he also claimed responsibility for this armed incursion in Macuto and for the terrorist group that we have captured, and some of them were gone down, which we'll continue to capture over the next few hours.
Venezuela is accusing the United States and its drug enforcement agency of masterminding the failed attack against the country. More details in this report.
For 1 year, the incursionists lived in 3 camps in neighboring Colombia.
It's up to us to create a new history.
About 300 deserters of the Venezuelan military and police force enlisted under the command of at least 3 former special operations soldiers from the United States.
We will train and follow your tactical plan to help us free our country from tyranny. You can count on us.
On the front lines is 43-year-old Jordan Woodrow, a highly decorated 3-time Bronze Star recipient for courage in deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan as a Special Forces medic.
We want to thank you, Mr. Jordan, for helping us work towards the liberation of Venezuela.
On its website, Woodrow's private security company, Silver Corp USA, boasts of conducting operations in more than 50 countries. Woodrow aligned himself to U.S. President Donald Trump's incessant need to topple President Maduro and was soon introduced to Trump's longtime bodyguard Keith Schiller through someone who worked in private security. Both attended a meeting with opposition member Juan Guaido in the United States.
I've asked my team to update our plans to reopen the U.S. Embassy in Caracas so that we are ready to go. As soon as Maduro steps aside, I am confident that we will raise that flag again in Caracas.
Operation Gideon saw the arrest or assassination of President Nicolás Maduro and the seizure of Caracas in 96 hours. However, at the first sign of failure, the lead incursionist had this to say.
Our men are continuing to fight right now. Our units have been activated in the south, west, and east of Venezuela.
By that time, the Bolivarian forces had already killed 8 of the mercenaries. Authorities also revealed that one of the men who was captured confessed to being a DEA agent.
I spoke to Captain Antonio Sequea. We met in Bogota, and he presented a military operation that was organized by Donald Trump and his government.
Later, 2 former U.S. soldiers were captured in the coastal state of Aragua.
One of them is Luke Alexander Denman, war veteran.
The U.S. citizens are from the state of Texas, one from Dallas, the other from Austin, and were part of a contract signed by opposition member Juan Guaido to invade Venezuela.
Yeah, you can do the sign. Okay, he signed in every page. Like I said,
Guaido first dismissed the armed incursion against his country as a montage of the government. Once neutralized, hours later he began to demand respect for the human rights of the mercenaries.
They were waiting for them to kill them. Who are those bodies they showed in the state of Vargas?
After absolute silence for more than 48 hours, Donald Trump denied any connection to the plot to overthrow Nicolas Maduro.
I just got information, nothing to do with our government, but I just got information on that. So we'll find out. We just heard about it. But whatever it is, we'll let you know. But it has nothing to do with our government.
U.S. media have dubbed Operation Gideon the Venezuelan Bay of Pigs, in reference to the first great defeat of the United States in Latin America when its mercenaries invaded Cuba by entering Playa Girón.
Brazilian outlet Brazil Wire has reported that Silvercorp USA, the U.S. security company behind this failed operation against the Venezuelan government, was present in Brazil during the 2018 elections. Our correspondent Brian Meir explains.
A breaking story published in Brazil Wire, the English-language news portal about Brazil by journalist Natalia Urban, shows that Silvercorp USA, the mercenary company that has ties to the Donald Trump administration, which was hired by Juan Guaido to engage in the failed coup d'etat attempt that happened yesterday in Venezuela, was operating in Brazil during the 2018 presidential elections, which saw the rise of right-wing extremist Jair Bolsonaro in the most tumultuous election in Brazilian history. After the leading candidate, who was polling at double the support of anyone else in the race, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, was removed from the election on frivolous corruption charges with no material evidence. Now, at the time of the elections, there were over 50 violent attacks committed across the country by Bolsonaro supporters, including several murders. According to social media postings on Instagram that were subsequently erased, Silvercorp executives claim that they were leaving Brazil after an unspecified amount of time, 11 days after the first round election. So the question is, what were they doing in Brazil? What were they working on, and who hired them?
That was Brian Meir from Brazil. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in a minute. Welcome back. More news at this hour. Jamaica has recorded 2 new cases of COVID-19, bringing the total number of positives to 473. The 2 patients are from St. Andrews and St. Catherine. The number of confirmed cases from the workplace cluster remains at 221. Additionally, there are 11 local transmission cases and 257 are under investigation. Renowned Jamaican singer Millie Small has passed away after suffering a stroke at the age of 73. The singer died in London, England, where she migrated in 1963 to pursue a pop career. She was the first Jamaican artist to popularize ska music and achieved international pop chart success with My Boy Lollipop, selling over 6 million records after it was released in 1964. Other singles include Sweet William, Bloodshot Eyes, and See You Later, Alligator. Prime Minister Andrew Holness tweeted a message of condolences to her family. Trinidadian British poet Roger Robinson has won this year's $10,000 Ondaatje Prize for his collection, A Portable Paradise. Robinson said he was happy to gain recognition for the political issues raised in his collection. He also expressed hope that people gain empathy from reading about the struggles of black communities in Britain. In January, A Portable Paradise was selected as a New Statesman Book of the Year and also won the coveted T.S. Eliot Prize in 2019.
It is the job of the...
Protesters in Peru have gathered outside the Ministry of Labor to demand construction sector workers receive aid as a result of lockdown measures. Demonstrators wore face masks and held banners as they chanted for the government to support all construction workers with a bonus of about $111. The construction workers say they have been following stay-at-home orders, leaving them without a paycheck to afford basic food items.
We are in the streets once again. We, the people who work with the scaffolding, are demanding with one voice nationwide for a bonus for civil construction workers. Up to this point, the government hasn't said anything, hasn't confirmed if construction workers will get aid, as thousands of colleagues are without a single cent to cover basic food needs, since we have been respecting this quarantine. However, hunger is forcing us to go out to the streets. We ask that more than 400,000 colleagues nationwide demand a bonus for civil construction, and the government has said nothing so far.
Residents of a Sao Paulo favela in Brazil have graduated as first aid workers to help their community combat COVID-19. Hundreds graduated as first aid workers in Paraisópolis, the second largest favela with more than 100,000 people. Residents say their actions are essential since the government doesn't have a program for the favelas during the pandemic. The region is one of the most affected by the virus, and Brazil has reached now the highest daily death toll since the pandemic hit the country, with 600 cases.
We are facing an urgent moment. We cannot wait. This is very serious. That is why here we are helping each other.
We decided to set up Death Brigade because we struggle a lot to have public ambulance services, which we call SAMU. We call them and they don't answer. And even when they answer the call, nobody comes. So we cannot rely on fast public service.
Now to Bolivia. The president of the lower house has raised the possibility of modifying a recently proposed law that requires elections to be held within 90 days, depending on the progression of COVID-19. Let's have a look.
A bill proposed by the Electoral Court says that elections could be held within 45 days, but suggests to wait for 150 days. However, the Legislative Assembly instead declared a 90-day window to hold these elections, which set off a campaign by the de facto government against the movement towards Socialism Party.
To politicize this during the pandemic is not right. We are interested in protecting lives, and the separation of powers is being ignored. The Electoral Court has established a time frame, but they don't care to respect it.
The de facto government announced that this week they will ask for a repeal of the lower house law project to once again leave these delayed elections in limbo. Right-wing candidate Carlos Mesa, for his part, has asked for a meeting to reach an agreement.
We need a clear roadmap considering the pandemic, putting the lives of the people ahead of everything else. We also need a government chosen by the people. A transitional government cannot lead in this time.
Last January, the Constitutional Court ruled that the elections cannot be delayed indefinitely, once again, as it would be an unconstitutional act.
Suggesting open dates leads to uncertainty, which is probably what Mrs. Áñez wants, to stay in power for an indefinite amount of time without having been elected.
Lawmakers from the MAS party, who hold a majority of votes in both the lower house and the Senate, cited Article 169 of the Constitution that says that a transitional government has at most 90 days to call for elections, a time frame long past.
We are willing to meet with experts once the terms have expired, like we've done until now, and to talk with the Electoral Court to define changes.
8 political parties are in the running for the elections. 7 from the right wing that backed last November's coup against President Evo Morales, against the left-wing movement towards socialism, which is still the front-runner.
Now to South Africa. Epidemiologist and Chief Government Advisor Salim Abdul Karim says the government has so far managed to screen 15% of the population for COVID-19.
The 7th of April, we have our community health workers just going house to house, screening people for symptoms and then testing them. We have to date screened something like 7.5 million people. That's about 15% of our population. We are in the region of around sort of 2.7 to about 3.7% of our tests are positive. If you want to translate that, we do roughly about 40 tests to find one positive.
Malawi's two main opposition leaders have registered for a rerun in July of the elections that saw President Peter Mutharika controversially return to office. Malawi's top court in February overturned last year's vote and called for fresh polls, citing widespread irregularities. Both the President and the Electoral Commission have appealed against the election annulment. It is the first time a presidential election has been challenged on legal grounds in Malawi since independence from Britain in 1964. 10 candidates are expected to run in the new election, which has been set for July 2nd. We'll be right back. Join us again after this break. Thank you for joining us again. Israel's Supreme Court has refused to bar Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from forming a government, rejecting petitions to disqualify him over a felony indictment. The top court also declined to block an unusual power-sharing agreement that Netanyahu struck with Benny Gantz. The former army chief previously challenged Netanyahu in 3 straight elections before joining forces with him to avoid a 4th ballot, citing the emergency posed by the coronavirus. Spain's parliament has voted to extend the country's state of emergency as daily death tolls remain in the hundreds. This vote will allow stringent coronavirus measures to remain in place for at least 2 more weeks. The government imposed a lockdown 8 weeks ago to stop the spread of the virus. Spain is one of the most affected nations by COVID-19, which has killed more than 25,000 people and infected over 220,000 in the country. U.S. President Donald Trump plans to disband the coronavirus task force and may replace it with a different group as the country gradually reopens.
So I think that as far as the task force, Mike Pence and the task force have done a great job, but we're now looking at a little bit of a different form, and that form is safety and opening, and we'll have a different group probably set up for that.
Are you saying mission accomplished?
No, not at all. The mission accomplished is when it's over.
China has lashed out at U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo over his claims that the coronavirus originated in a lab in Wuhan.
Mr. Pompeo has said a lot recently. He said that he has enormous evidence. Then show us. But I have seen reports that WHO officials also said that the U.S. has not shown any evidence to WHO so far. And according to the recent reports, it seems that the senior officials of the U.S. have changed their mind on the evidence. Mr. Pompeo repeatedly spoke up, but he cannot present any evidence. How can he come up with evidence? Because he doesn't have any. So I think this matter should be handed to scientists and medical professionals and not politicians who lie for their own domestic political ends.
British authorities announced the coronavirus death toll in the country passed 30,000 after a further 649 deaths were announced on Wednesday.
Today's data shows that 1,448,010 tests for coronavirus have now been carried out across Great Britain, including 69,463 tests carried out yesterday. 201,1 101 people have tested positive. That's an increase of 6,111 cases since yesterday. 13,615 people are currently in hospital with coronavirus in Great Britain, down from 13,922 yesterday. And sadly, of those hospitalised with the virus, 30,076 have now died. That's an increase of 649 fatalities since yesterday.
On Tuesday, Iran sent a shipment of humanitarian aid to Palestinian refugees in Syria, a show of solidarity that has been welcomed with open arms.
The shipment of medicine, food and other basic goods comes just as every other year during the holy month of Ramadan. Palestinians express their gratitude as this year it will help them get through the COVID-19 pandemic.
This aid from the Islamic Republic of Iran is just part of the ongoing help they've always given us in the holy month of Ramadan. This year, it also coincides with global Al-Quds celebrations, and as always shows the support the Palestinian cause has from Iran.
We send our thanks to Iran and their supreme leader. Us Palestinians here in Syria are suffering, just like our Syrian brothers, due to the pandemic and Western sanctions. Iran is showing they will not abandon us, despite their own struggles.
This aid arrives not only in the midst of the pandemic, but also as a unilateral blockade against Syria intensifies.
From Damascus, we ratify that this is a focal point of Palestinian resistance and that we will stand by our allies, like Syria, Iran, Hezbollah, and other forces that stand against the U.S. Zionist bloc in the region.
Their help shows how much Iran supports the Palestinian cause and our resistance, and also highlights the failure of political and economic pressure imposed on them to abandon our cause.
Besides their support for Palestinians, Tehran is also steadfast in its support for Damascus in the political, economic, and military front.
And with that, we end our news brief. But you can find these and more stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. And be also sure to follow us on social media. Please stay safe. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.